All right, so hello and welcome to this little free webinar about searching for love. So if you're joining us live or watching the recording, it's because you might be looking for love. And so I took this little adventure talking with over 50 people, single men and women, and figuring out what is the struggle. Why are we not so easily finding our soulmate, our life partner? So I decided to ask the questions. So let's see what I found. So, but first of all, for those who don't know me, my name is Aurélie. If you're not sure how to pronounce it or to remember it, say, oh, really? Usually I turn around, and that's not a joke. One of my past employers, when I arrived in Australia about 10 years ago, used to call me that, and I turned automatically. So yeah, don't be afraid to mispronounce my name. I'm kind of used to it. Beautiful name from France, because that's where I grew up. And I like to think that I learned quite a few things about romance from my country of origin. That's well known to be the capital of love, or Paris is. So I'm hoping to bring a bit of that knowledge, of this vibe, of this flair here in Australia. And I also wrote down there that I've been dancing salsa for over 15 years. So not just to brag about myself, but just because I think it's very relevant in the sense that salsa is the perfect metaphor for a relationship. It's the perfect representation of the collaboration of the masculine and the feminine, and co-creating a beautiful dance, something together, working together with connection towards something bigger and more beautiful. So that's just for a little stuff. But if you really want to know why you should listen to me when I'm talking about love, well, I'm a love coach. I've been a certified NLP practitioner and life coach for over 6 years, but I took the big plunge to becoming a full-time love coach since the beginning of this year. So I am coaching regularly strong, independent women. That's the people I help the most, whether they're single or they're struggling in the relationship. And we work together to find love. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is that little research that I created. So first of all, I'll address why I went down the rabbit hole, and then how I actually did it. What was the specifics? What parameters I put around it? Who contributed? And that's very important. That says a lot, and that explains a lot of the answers that I uncovered. What I learned, and you all learned tonight as well. And of course, it's really great to have a lot of information, to know a lot of things, but what's the point if we're not using them? So I'll share with you a few things that you can look into if you're interested, to keep working with me. And we'll finish with a Q&A or conversation, however you want to make it. It's your space, so you can definitely jump in, ask questions, make comments. I'd love it if you could participate as much as you want, because this is your space as much as mine. So why this research? So I wanted all the lines to come one after the other. As I explained before, I'm a bit technically challenged, but that's all right. You'll get the gist of it. So I started this research because working with women, they had a few statements about men and beliefs that I personally didn't agree with. But because it kept coming, I thought, well, I might as well ask the people who are supposedly like that, and that's the men. Because I'm exclusively working with women in monogamous relationships and heterosexual relationships. And so I went to ask the men first, and in the process, I started asking the women as well, because I thought, well, that's great to have all this data and learn a lot about men, but if I don't do anything with it, what's the point? And that's why I asked more questions, so I could create a course or some content that could support women to find love. So how I did it. Well, first of all, I had to find some guinea pigs, right? So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher. I didn't have like a strict protocol where I wanted specifically this kind of people at a certain time, at a certain point in their love journey. I left it very much to the universe, if you believe in that, or to chance, to bring the right people. And actually, this path, this luck, brought me a good panel of people and allowed me to have another reflection about what was going on and the results I got. So I mainly posted on my personal Facebook, because I have a few people that follow me about relationships. I put it in a few single people groups on Facebook as well. And some are more active than others, but I'll explain later. And I do a lot of networking. So every week I go to 3 or 4 networking events for work, and I do meet a lot of people. So I kept asking, do you know anyone who's single who would like to talk with me? Just having a simple conversation. I'm doing some research. So that was the basis of who I was talking to. The process was on the phone or video. And what was really amazing is that if we followed the simple process I had established, it should only last 15 minutes. The people have been extremely, extremely generous with their time, insights, and really showing a lot of vulnerability. And I felt so, like it gave so much more meaning to what I'm doing. Like I really love what I do. I love love, but that really warmed my heart. That's very, very special to have people opening up so much, and men in particular, and I'll explain why I think that is a bit later. And I'd love to hear from the men in the room towards the end of the event. My framework was only a few questions, 4 questions, I think that is in total, and that's the ones that we're going to review first for the learnings, and we have a chat about other parameters that have come up woven in between what people have shared that were not straight answered, but that seemed to be a common theme around what people shared. Okay, Zoom is interfering with the PowerPoint. That's fantastic. There you go. Okay, so who took part to this little research? So I spoke with 58 people. That's a lot of people, if you ask me, but amazing. 60%, yeah, like I said, that's a rounded number, but that's 60% of men and 40% of women contributed. Now, my explanation to that is that simply I started research with men before starting with women. Yeah, that's as simple as that. Having said that, even towards the end, it felt like men were really happy to just go for it. And I was really surprised by that, because commonly there's a common thought that women are better at relationships. So that's interesting. On average, so our men were between 27 and 61 years old, women between 32 and 52 years old, so both in their 40s on average. Yeah, so that means that we had people who already had an experience of what it is to be in a relationship. A lot of them have had some long relationships, have been burnt, hurt, or have learned some big lessons from this relationship, and usually tend to have shorter relationships, 3 to 6 months now. It feels harder. There's a lot more filters and more things that come to play when it comes to meeting and selecting a partner at the back of these relationships. And in terms of locations, a lot of people from Queensland, a few from New South Wales, so mostly Sydney, Blue Mountains and Byron, and a few from Victoria, from Melbourne in particular, and Adelaide. So Queensland is a big state, and I had people from the north, from the Sunshine Coast, from Brisbane, and from the Gold Coast, so from all over the place. And I find in the conclusions I came with that sometimes the location is relevant in terms of the mindset. People living in the cities have a more structured and more controlling, that's a massive generalization, okay? But the mindset is slightly different when it comes to approaching and talking to strangers in the street or in the shops. Now, the source of where I found my people. So I told you a little bit about that before, and here I mentioned TFS, so Toxin Free Singles Group, and that's when most people came to me. So I went to different singles group, but this one I found had a very special vibe, and people didn't wait for me to chase them in a way. They really came to me. They reached out to me and they said, "I'd love to be part of it." Like they sent me private messages, and that really warmed my heart. I think the common theme for this particular group is these people have done a lot of work on themselves. They've come to conclusions about their health, about lifestyle, about life and how things go. They've done a lot of work around that, and connection is very important to them. Like being human is really important. And I think, well, that's common through all the people I've spoken with, otherwise we wouldn't have spoken at all. But the mindset is slightly different than your typical single in the city. Okay, so now I'm digging straight into the questions I asked. So you'll see a little lady at the corner when I ask the question to the women, and a little gentleman in the corner when I ask the men, and sometimes they're both on the slide. So here I was asking, what has been your challenge when it comes to relationship? Now I molded a bit that question. I changed it as I went because some people had recently broken up, and that meant that they were most likely in a process of healing, of grieving, of understanding what had happened, drawing the lesson from that particular experience to not bring it forward in the next relationship. So, but I still ask, like, if they were in this period, if they were also actively looking for a partner. So for the women, what's the challenge? So finding someone up to my standards, that's what they said. And strong independent women. So the women I work with typically have done so much work to get to the level of independence they have, to get the freedom they have. Like they work so hard to be financially independent, not rely on a man, to run the show. That finding someone who's as strong as they are, who meets them to the level of commitment to life and everything else, and that they are, becomes really challenging. Some other women had a problem with figuring out what they want. That can be actually both, but in one of the first sessions I do with my clients, I ask them, what do you actually want in a partner, in a relationship? What's important to you? And very often, it's very common that they will give me a long list of what they don't want. Well, that wasn't the question. Now, if you've done a bit of coaching or things like that, you would know that if you focus on what you don't want, you're just attracting more of that. So it's really important when you want something that you focus on what you do want, not the negative stuff. And that's not uncommon. Figuring out what you want is when trying a lot of different things to make your mind. And so some people went down a process. One guy went to 30 dates in a month, so every day. And after that, he was like, yeah, okay, I'm done with the apps. I'm not doing that anymore. Now I'm pretty good at screening people. When I meet them in the street, I know kind of who's my girl. Another lady did 1 date a week and a similar experience from memory. So fear to commit to the wrong person. So that's FOMO, fear of missing out. So, and that's a typical, that's a generalization. Again, a lot of generalization, you know, like that's big picture stuff that I'm sharing here. It's typical of an avoidance attachment style, if you're familiar with that. So it's typically when you love being with your partner, but when it becomes too serious, you just run away. And it's just in your makeup, that's something we can work on to find safety within yourself, to feel committed and yeah, wanted to connect to a level where you don't feel like running away. Committing to the wrong person suggests also that you don't trust yourself in making the right choices for yourself. Again, really broad comment that doesn't apply to everybody, and that's things that we can discuss in a one-on-one session. Communication with men. So communication is the biggest topic of everything, relationship, business, anywhere. Communication is the foundation of everything. And here, in particular, women want men to come to them. They want them to be brave, to be strong, and come to them and communicate with them. Now, on the other side of the equation, we'll see it after, men would like to do that, but they feel kind of scared. They feel scared of being rejected because it's happened in the past, and I've witnessed that sometimes in the bar where a guy comes and they're just laughing at the guy or making comments, and that's bonding with their tribe, but that's not really nice for the guy. And there's also social thingy happening with social anxiety around COVID. So people kind of, I don't know if that's true or if it's an excuse to not approach other people. And also the Me Too movement seems to have struck a lot of the male's psyche. So on the men's side, what did the men have to say? So when I asked, what's your challenge, or what's your process? A lot of them, and I was surprised to hear that, like, that's a bit judgmental, right? That they were saying, I'm actually working on myself. So maybe some people would think, oh, that's selfish. Well, I think that's a very beautiful thing to do, to want to be the best version of yourself, to be someone of substance. And a lot of them shared as well that they want to be able to care for their ladies. They want to be able to hold space for them given the chance. That's one of the big challenges. So men said they don't want to waste their time. So one in particular who runs a business said, well, my time is precious. When I spend an hour, it costs this much. And I want to make sure that when I go to a date, it's worth it. And we've got Sarita joining us. So they want to know that when they spend the time in that date, it's worth it. And by the same token, they don't want, they want to build up the relationship, which I think is the healthiest way to have a relationship. So it's starting as a friendship, starting to getting to know each other, which is an experience that we're a bit robbed from or of when we use the apps, because we tend to have an idea in mind of who the person on the other side of the screen is based on what they've shared, which is probably the idea they have that the other person has of them. Do you follow me? That's kind of a marketing effort, right? You're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to look your best. And that's not necessarily a real reflection of who you are or what would actually attract the right person. So yeah, long story short, to saying they would like to be friends and build up the relationship. Now, a lot of women will cut the process, and especially women around the 40s, one of the age groups I work the most with, because they have this pressure, whether personal or social or family pressure, of wanting to build a family, having children. And so they will be if they don't say it out loud, they will have it in their energy that they want a child. And so they become very much in the hunt for a father rather than having interest for the man in the person, right? And that's very detrimental to actually meeting and connecting to the highest level, which can happen reasonably quick. But because of what's sticking in their head, they're preventing the slow process of getting to know someone. So rejection and prejudgment is something I shared before. Someone shared, it's funny when I feel someone is looking at me and then I turn towards them and they look down, and vice versa. So that's both men and women that tend to have this thing where, can I talk to you or not talk to you? I'm still checking you out. It's a interesting behavior. And yeah, I mentioned before also social anxiety, potentially due to COVID. Okay, where do you or would you like to meet people? So no one likes the apps. I guess it's also, again, a reflection of the population I've been speaking with. Yeah, like I tend to attract or to be around, or whether my network or the broader network are people who like to connect, who want genuine connection. They're not in the dating game just for a date. It's not a sport. They really want to connect in the longer term. They really want to build a relationship. So the apps is counter nature, doesn't really help that process. So some people have found love, have built long-term relationships after meeting on apps. It requires a specific kind of mindset. I don't say it's impossible. I just think that when you do go to that first date, you have to have a really open mind. You have kind of to erase what you've seen on the screen. Like, that was the first point of contact, but you leave it at that. Don't remember anything of it. Start fresh when you meet the person. And so everything else is really about living your best life, being the best version of yourself. So I guess the men have it right when they say they're working on themselves first, because if you hang around the right places, around the people who nurture your interests or love the same thing as you do, you're more likely to find some like-minded people who might have similar values and want to share life with you. So that is obviously in-person events, but also Facebook groups and in your friend circle. So if your friends invite you to a party, go. If you feel that you've already checked that pool, well, find new friends. Facebook groups are really good for that, as long as you really play the social game, not the stalking game. The social game being someone posts something, engage the conversation, continue and see where it takes you. You know, and then you might go for a coffee or whatever it is. And you don't have to necessarily just hang around, if you're a woman, men, or vice versa, not just the opposite sex, because you're on a hunt. For women, make other girlfriends. Although, speaking about surrounding influences, I would recommend that women hang out with more men. That would probably help with the mindset about what they think about men. Okay, so what do you find attractive in a man? So I think this one would be interesting for men. What I found particularly interested in that particular question is the order in which men and women were throwing the adjectives. Women would put the physical aspects way quicker than men. Men would hardly mention it. And I said to them, you know, you can, you know, don't be shy. You can talk about boobs and bum. Like, I hear about that. I've heard about that. So you can go for it. And say, no, actually, I'll go to the men later. Women, let's focus. So women want a man who is a man, not a boy. Someone who knows how to take care of himself, who is secure within himself, who is not looking for mom. And as a woman, if you are very giving, if you're very nurturing, and you tend to be rescuing, you will be attracting men that are potentially a bit relying on you to sort their life and do stuff, get things moving. So yeah, women tend to want men who have it all together. And that comes down to what we were saying before. They want someone who lives up to their standards. They want someone who they're physically attracted to. So I found that comment very interesting because, as I said, they brought it in the conversation where the men didn't particularly, they did to some extent, but not as much as the women. I lost my train of thought. I do that. Anyway, I'll come back to it if it comes back. They want someone who is a great communicator. So someone who, so if you're still in the process of, you know, the apps and messages and things like that, so someone who writes regularly, who answers at least, like ghosting is not very reflecting of a good personality. And I'd like to remind here that communication is a lot more than words. And that's why I think the apps are jinxed. Communication is only 7% words. It's 38% the tone of your voice and 55% your body language. So when you look at an app, you're essentially judging someone on 7% of communication. Nothing. You've made a judgment on nothing. So I really encourage you to get out there and meet real people. And even if you have this first inkling on the app, just go and meet them as quick as you can, or even if it's hearing the sound of their voice on the phone, that will give you a lot more clues than rereading their profile 1,000 times. Compatibility of values. So that is a big topic, values, because what makes a couple work in the long term is if you have aligned values and an aligned vision for who you want to be as a couple. If you're believing in totally different things, it makes it very much more difficult to make decisions together and to move forward in the same direction. Now, it doesn't say it's impossible, but you have to be extremely good communicators and very accepting of another model of the world. So it really makes it hard. But I think we, by nature, we gravitate around people who support our belief system and our model of the world. We not only attract them, we create them for those who understand quantum physics and how, even how the brain works. What we see is our own idea of the world. Anyway, humor, jokes, and fun. Yes, please. I felt that with the women I typically work with, it is very serious. Life is very much under control, which is great and provides a lot of safety in a way, but life is very, very serious. So I love it when they bring up humor, jokes, and fun, because that's the definition of flirting. It's not taking things seriously, it's just being you. Okay, so now let's see what the men had to say. What did they find particularly attractive in a woman? So straight away, they would say things like kindness, like she's nice, she's a good human being her genuine self. So I guess that reflects what they were saying about themselves. They are working on themselves. They want to be the best version of themselves. So they too want women to be their best self and live their best life. They want a woman who knows what she wants. So again, someone who's done the work. Playfulness, being flirtatious. So that comes again, like the humor, the jokes, the fun. They want to feel wanted and acknowledged. And I actually heard that on both sides. They want to feel heard. They want to be heard. And something I regularly remind to people when they say, you know, I want to speak my truth. I say, well, that's great. I just want you to be aware of your intentions behind speaking your truth. Is it you speaking your truth because you want to be heard, or are you speaking your truth because you want to release, to feel relieved of some weight? Because the result and the conversation will be very different. If you do want to be heard, then you will probably speak in a different way. Someone who wants to release will maybe yell at the other person and say, that's what I want. And the effect is never positive. So yeah, be really mindful of how you communicate. Comes down to communication, always the same thing circling back around and again and again. So people want to feel wanted and acknowledged. And yeah, there was mentioned here, and that was by a few gentlemen, that you know, in a conversation, being heard. I don't know how else to say it. And as I said before, they want someone, they're not very specific about the way their girlfriend looks like, but they say for sure, like they acknowledge, they say for sure the physical aspect matters, because that's the first thing you see. Not as much as how tall or the color of your eyes or your hair. What they're interested in, when they look at you, like even quickly, it just gives them an idea of how well you take care of yourself, how much you respect yourself. So that's totally surface level judgment, but that's the first, that's really, yeah, the quick insight they gave me on looking at a female physical aspect. Okay, so what are your deal breakers? What is a no-no at all, red flag? You definitely don't go for that guy. So you don't go for a guy who is insecure. He doesn't know who he is. And that would trigger some behavior and potentially jealousy or other anger kind of triggers. So that's a no-no. And it comes back again, working on yourself, being your best version. They don't want someone who is disrespectful. So in a few discussions. It was about looking at other women when you're in their presence, or even when you're not there. They felt it wasn't respectful for them, and it wasn't respectful for the person who was looked at. So that we don't know. That's mind read, total mind read. But if that's in your values, or if that's in your personal rules on how to live your relationship, you have to communicate that with your partner, because it can, if it's communicated, or if you make it a game where you point at a girl and say, oh, she's good looking, then it becomes a game in the relationship, and it can have a different meaning. But definitely, if that's something that triggers you, it's something to discuss with your partner, because when you say the problem, it no longer exists. So it's really important to be honest and transparent in our communication. They don't want cheaters. Seems pretty obvious, but not everyone says it. Drugs and the vaccination status has become something that's along the lines of the values that we were talking about before. So someone who has the same belief system around the world, their health, lifestyles in general, how they make decisions, willpower, resilience, a lot of things. And a lot of unvaccinated people have said, oh, the pool has got really smaller. But on the other side, people say, well, that's actually making a lot of the work for us, because it might or might not show how digestible or how people think about the world in general. So what are the deal breakers for the men? A woman who's trying to control everything, and especially them, actually, like a woman who's trying to micromanage their every movement or everything they do or how they do it. A woman who's a bit bossy, that's actually totally unattractive. I have an example, like a personal example. A friend, she was totally OCD, like we have to say that. I went to her place and I was always scared I would leave a stain on her table. Anyway, she was complaining that her boyfriend wasn't emptying at home. And one day he took the initiative to empty the dishwasher. And the first thing she said was, well, you're not doing it properly. And so I was like, well, no wonder it doesn't help and he doesn't want to help, because you're not empowering him to do it more and to learn to do it the right way or your way. So yeah, I get that. Someone who's controlling is not particularly attractive. Competitiveness, fighting, disagreeing for the sake of it. Competitiveness, I feel, was a lot around the masculine feminine dynamic, and yeah, a lot of the women who are very independent are still in a fighting mode in a way to gain their place or to maintain the status where they fought so much to be treated as equal with the men. So I guess that's, I can't remember, but I guess that's what it was referring to. On the opposite side of the scale, we have someone who is too agreeable. So that shows the low self-esteem, they're not being herself, and they're not stepping in, they're not bringing something to the table. And that's also a no-no. That's typically where you put the person in the friend zone. Like, yeah, well, yeah, they're nice. That you want someone, they want someone who's challenging them a bit. And I guess that's, again, in that perspective of wanting to grow, or wanting to work in themselves, or being a better version of themselves. So you want someone who's stimulating that dynamic. They don't like someone who is cynic, would that be the word? Someone who's negative, and like if it's done consistently, it's potentially a defense mechanism to not take things seriously because that's too painful. So just putting on the side, using cynicism to mask it, potentially, that's what's happening there. Okay, so here is where my study was a bit different when I spoke with men and women. So with men, I would ask these kind of questions, ask them to comment on what I heard from the women I worked with. With the women, I asked different questions because I wanted to create a course or something that would really support them in their quest of finding love. So let's focus on the men for now. So when I said, so I'm going to take my notes here. the women said, I can't meet anyone I am attracted to. So what it triggered for the men, what came up for them was, well, she needs to change her mindset. She needs to take care of herself. So that's interesting, where she's saying something about what's happening outside. They are saying, well, she needs to look inside. How is that a reflection of her? So I found it really interesting that, yeah, they wouldn't take it for them. I guess that could be a difference from them. But here there's no attack, nothing, you know. So it's really they suggested that they look inwards. Men are intimidated by my success. And I really love that one, because there's a really strong belief around that one, that if a woman has a higher status or earns more money than a man, that can't work, and the man will get jealous. And that's typically where I disagreed with women, and where I was really happy. Sorry, ladies. When men said, no, actually, we're not intimidated by the success. The opposite. We are very encouraging it, and we're really proud of our lady when she does step up. Now, what they don't like, though, is the attitude. Someone who might be belittling them, or who might do the comparison and putting them down in certain ways. Now, are they really putting them down? We don't know. That might be the man's interpretation of the world as well, if he doesn't feel that strong within himself, and he's comparing himself, and he is suddenly feeling like he's not good enough, or whatever the belief system is there. So that's a very interesting belief system on both sides. I've been raising a lot of comments and questions. It ticks most of the boxes, but there's something missing. So the standards are too high. She thinks everything should be perfect. It's not possible to tick all the boxes. She should be clear on the must-haves. She's missing vulnerability to connect. And I kind of agree with that. I'm in that box too. It's a default mechanism. Like, you'd see, it's a very masculine kind of process to tick boxes, right? And even if you had like the perfect guy standing right next to you, you would probably add more boxes. And that's a typical defense mechanism, because there might be some part of you, some level of the subconscious maybe, that is really, really scared to be in a relationship, really, really scared to be vulnerable, to connect, to even touch on emotions. So by finding excuses outside of us, we kind of ignoring the problem, or pushing it down, or leave it to later. I don't like dating apps. Well, we've heard about that one. I actually listened recently to a podcast. Well, that's a French one, so I'm sorry. I might share it somewhere on my Facebook. I don't know if it's translated somewhere. That lady, she published a book about Tinder. She did a very scientifically driven approach to not like mine, to that. And she went to Tinder. She saw the algorithms. She saw how they actually match people. How it's mind-boggling. They rank people. They attribute points based on a lot of different things that, depending on what you believe on, you could think also shape our society and how we relate to one another, which is not a natural process of connection. So very interesting one to look into, and hopefully there's the equivalent in English or a translation of it. Men only want casual relationships. Not at all. Hang on, I'm trying to find, because I mixed up the questions. They want more. They don't want, meaningful sex. It's just release, and they don't really want that. Like, our men really have feelings. We really need to acknowledge that. We really need to understand that, and they really do want this deep connection, should they be allowed to. And I think the biggest problem that I've observed through this research and through the work I do is these and salsa comes to my mind now, this connection between men and women, where we're very much stuck in our own worlds, but not communicating and not working together. I shared with some of you, I went to the beginner salsa class recently, and So I've been dancing for a long, long time. I've been performing, I've been competing, I've been social dancing mostly. And so in that class, I was interesting to see, because I was a beginner's class, I stepped into the shoes of the leader, of a male leading role. And so some women would like hold on for their life. And I was like, whoa, if that was a representation of how you handle life and relationships, you really, you know, you need you're using me as a crutch. You're really needy in a way, and I can't guide you anywhere if you're holding on so much. And conversely, I would have some women who would give me nothing. I was like, well, I need a bit of your energy to be able to lead you and get you somewhere. So it's really like collaboration, something we create, we co-create together. Yeah, and so women in the beginner stages, they really want to take control, and I think that was the one thing I was like, oh my goodness, really want to take control. And I think that's a need for security that independence is bringing up. But like, if we could trust that men have the best interest for women, and likewise women have the best interest for men, then we would have way better dynamics, and we could work together, and those relationships would happen instead of everyone being on the back foot, not communicating, blaming the other, and nothing's happening. So that's just a start of a conversation, this one. And I have high standards and not ready to compromise. So we touched on that as well. Yeah. High expectations, again, might be very justified because they've worked a lot on themselves, but also could potentially be like placing the bar so high that it's unattainable, and maybe they're not even doing half of what they expect from the guy themselves. So yeah, so that's it. Oh, something I didn't write anywhere, but that came up in the conversation. And being French, that's really something I experienced myself. So I was saying, for me, when I go to France, or when I lived in France, I would meet guys all the time, at the bakery, at the shop, in the streets, anywhere. And there was this kind of lightness about it, you know, being flirtatious, and it didn't mean anything about it. It didn't mean that we were going to end up dating. It didn't mean that he was cheating. It didn't mean anything. It was just being playful and engaging in conversation. And that's where there was a big distinction between big cities in Australia and rural Australia. In cities, it seems that men are kind of, what does she want? kind of attitude. And for me, it's like, oh my God, what did I do? Yes, they stick to giving me a straight answer, and then I don't know. There's not much room to discuss. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. So that's interesting behavior to observe. And a few of the women have shared that they have a different experience with European men who tend to approach them more easily and to start conversation compared to Australian men. So there might be also a social, local, cultural conditioning explaining that. Yeah, that's a few things I wanted to put in the air to support our conversation afterwards. So the next steps. So I just wanted to thank you first for showing up, to listening, to participating, to contributing to this little webinar, to my little research. But then if any of these resonates, and if you feel like, well, I'm triggered by a few things and I need to discuss about it, and I need to figure out what do I need to do next, please feel free to reach out. Like, I'm very happy to do free consultation with you, just to get to know you, see where you're at, what do you need, if I can help you, or if I can refer you to someone else. But also at the back of the conversation I've had with the women, I've created this 6-week group coaching program for women. So it's going to be starting on the 1st of November. And it's going to be a very nurturing, lovely container where we get to address the points that came up here. So we get to know, what do I want? Be really, really clear and specific about what we want. the communication, because that's a really big one, and there's the love languages entangled in that, and allowing the masculine in our world, allowing men in our lives, whether they're boyfriends or they're just, you know, friends. Also creating surrounding influences that support, you know, our search for love, because if you are a single woman and you only have single women as friends, I tell you what, you probably have a mindset that's not supporting what you're trying to achieve if you want to meet a guy. So that's something we can explore. So a lot of juicy stuff. So 1 hour online sessions a week, and then we'll have a Facebook group where you can mingle with all the other ladies, share your experience. And that's really the beauty of it. That's really something that everybody shares across the board, men and women, that they want to have this support in the journey. So say, hey, I went to that on that date and that was horrible. This happened. Or, oh, that was amazing. Or I sent him this text and now he's ghosting me. What did I do wrong, or whatever? So the community can answer to that, and obviously I'll be around and supporting the ladies in the group. And something that I really loved is the willingness of everybody to get to understand each other. Men and women have, or those I've spoken to anyway, really want to create those connections. And so next year, and talk to each other. So next year I'll be facilitating some mixed groups where men and women are invited to conversation, and we're going to start one of those conversations right now. So for those who are still here, thank you very much. And let's stop sharing this screen. Did I have more? That's the question thing. And I'll say that later. All righty. How is everybody? All right. I'd love to hear from you. So is there any burning questions, comments that you'd like to make? Or I don't know, the floor is yours. It is your room.
That was really good, Aurelie. Yeah, I was interested to see what men were finding attractive in women and what were deal breakers.
Yeah.
The deal breakers, I feel like I've heard every single one of them from men, so that wasn't a complete surprise to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to sort of look at myself now and just kind of, see where I sit with that, because I think in the past, if a man has ever, commented on what they want in a woman or what they expect, it's really got my defenses up. But I think that's a conditioning thing. I'd really like to sit in my own space and go, well, how do I sit with that? How do I feel? Who am I? Because obviously I want to be myself. I don't want to be told who I have to be. So it was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. And bouncing on that, well, I'll share you my personal story, my breakup story. But that really highlights that. So when I met my ex-partner, I was traveling the world. I was very independent. I had paid my bills. I knew I had sold everything, and I was traveling, and I had business ideas, and I knew exactly what I wanted, and I would speak my mind just like that. And that's what he found particularly attractive in me, that I had done all this work and that I knew who I was and what I wanted. And we got together, and sometime along the line, I lost myself. I tried to become the best girlfriend I thought he needed. So me, mind reading. And probably with a lot of conditioning from, movies or even French conditioning. Like, I mean, we love love, like we're pure romantic, like we can't hide. And so I just had this idea that I had to become this perfect woman, with the house perfectly clean all the time, with the kids taken care of all the time, having a job and be independent as well, and do all my things, do everything. And I totally lost myself to the point that I started resenting him. I started my communication shifted. I didn't see that. It was a lot of pain when I was in it, but I couldn't see that, and I couldn't resolve it within myself as long as I was in a relationship. So unfortunately, we had to part. But we still loved each other. That was the strangest thing. Like, we still loved each other when we split. But I had lost myself. So, and afterwards, when we spoke about that, he said, I don't know what went wrong, but I knew what did. I knew that by trying to be someone else, that wasn't sustainable. I couldn't pretend all of my life. I couldn't play a role of my life. And what he was attracted to was the original me, not the copy version of the perfect woman. So I think that's the lesson. Like, be yourself, because people want to see that. They want to feel your energy. You're unique. Every single one of us are unique, have something to bring to this planet, special gifts. And that's really what people resonate with as well. Yeah.
Definitely being genuine and authentic. And I know for me, because I was one of your participants in sharing this information, I just haven't felt safe to be in my feminine. I actually, for all these years, thought that, yeah, I was this strong, independent woman, but that was just a safety thing for me, because I didn't feel safe around men. I didn't feel safe to be soft, because I'd seen so many women get taken advantage of like that. But I'm actually, it's actually been wonderful the last couple of years. I've really gotten into my softness, and now I'm starting to open it up just a bit and start sharing it with men, but it's been a journey. So there's always, I guess, a story behind why anyone, men or women, do what they do.
Yeah.
We can sit there and judge and blame, or women are too masculine, or men are too weak, or whatever the things are. But there's a story behind it. It's it's not, it might not be their true selves. So
yeah, absolutely. Anyone else would like to share, or something that particularly resonated with you?
Aurelie, I arrived
Don't
half
worry.
an hour late, and is there a recording I can watch later on?
Yes, you will get the recording. Yes.
How would you send that to emails or what?
Yes, by email.
Okay, thank you so much.
No worries.
I missed like half of it.
So what is it from the bit that you heard that you found, I don't know, either very shocking or very interesting, or I don't know, is this something that stood out for you?
Not at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
What was this Facebook group that you got most of the connections from? What was the background for that one? Sorry.
It's called Toxin Free Single, and so that's people who choose to live like a beautiful, clean life, and that means for some of, I think all of them, unvaccinated. So there's a lot of the model of the world is probably different from some other people, and they're definitely looking for a how to put it, organic kind of life, as much in what they eat or they put on the skin as the way they relate to people and the way they live their life.
Dara, were you asking about the vaccination status or what?
No, I was asking about the group which she mentioned.
Oh.
What was your highlight, Dara? Is there anything that you found like surprising or enlightening?
No, it's pretty what you would expect, I think. I guess it depends on what circles you mix in more than anything else. Yeah, I found the dichotomy of like not too bossy, but also not too meek, kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think it's like everything. It's a fine balance. It's a dance in that when I speak about feminine and masculine, it's not about being a man or a woman, because every woman has a bit of masculine in them and every man has a bit of feminine in them. So it's really finding the balance, and in different times and contexts it might show up differently. But in the context of a relationship, it's really be able to put the relationship first and understand, like communicating clearly and honestly to find our way to work, and that will be uncomfortable at times, but yeah, finding the right balance, for lack of a better word. Yeah, anyone else would like to share? All right, well, sounds like we're done then. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you all for listening. For all those who've shared and contributed, I am forever grateful. That was an incredible experience for me. I felt my heart like, wow, I was connected with the whole world, I can tell you. I love my work, and I'm really privileged to do what I do. And if this resonates with you, if you're curious about working with me, well, just reach out to me and we can organize a chat or anything. All right. So have a lovely evening, and I'll see you around, I'm sure, soon. And I want to hear all your love stories. If you meet someone, I want to know. I'm a sucker for love stories. Anyway, on that note, have a good night, everyone.